All right, here we are with the Roman Empire. So we moved on from the Greeks, moved closer to modern day in time, and now we are in Rome. So this is chapter 4 if you're reading along in the book. And today will be a part 1 of a two-part series, I guess you could say, on Rome. So today I'm in my apartment. I will wrap up this section, have it posted here in an hour or so. It's Wednesday at 8 a.m. where I am, so about 9 a.m. where you are. And then the second part I will post tomorrow, probably evening, because I'll be traveling during the day. So Rome basically sprung up out of where the ancient Greek civilization was, and largely replaced it in power and influence. Now, the Roman Empire, like the Greek, largely influenced what we know today in sport and philosophy. And a lot of Western civilization in general is based off this foundation set by the Greeks and Romans. Now, the Romans built out of ancient Greece and what was called the Etruscans. Now, the Etruscan rule was from about 600 BC to about 509 BC. And we know most of what we know about the Etruscans from their lifestyle being depicted in burial tombs. Within these burial tombs, we saw ornate pictures of sport, of life, of what things look like. And you see a picture of that up here. For example, this is a depiction of an Etruscan chariot race. So the Etruscans were in what is now modern day Italy in the kind of north and central. So they sprung up from just below Rome all the way up towards modern day Switzerland and the Alps. So the Etruscans, we know, competed in lots of sports very similar to the Greeks and very similar styles. So they would do it in festivals, and people would travel to these city-states like the ones we see listed here in this picture, and they would compete. Again, very similar to the Greeks. Now, in their competitions, they would do a lot of what we know now to be track events, so running, javelin throwing, jumping, that sort of thing. Again, much like the Greeks, as well as wrestling and boxing and war preparation sports. So one thing that was interesting about the Etruscans, whereas the Greeks were very anti-women in sports, as we talked about, the Etruscans actually allowed women to compete, and not only that, but women and men would occasionally compete. So there's statues even depicting men and women wrestlers competing against one another, which is highly unusual this far in history. Before this, you didn't see women in sports really at all, and even if you did, they weren't competing against men; they were competing against women, largely. But here that starts to shift, which is interesting. So I put 2 videos here if you'd like to look over those. I'm not going to play them because, as we learned a few weeks ago, that might cause me major issues with getting this uploaded in time if there's any copyright stuff going on with those videos. But if you would like to know more about the Etruscans, that's some good resources. I'll post the PowerPoint and you can click from there. So Etruscan sport had a tendency towards violence, and this is something that the Romans would later pick up. So if they had prisoners, for example, they would pit the prisoners against each other, or they would sacrifice the prisoners, and this way they could honor their dead and honor their empire by taking these prisoners and ridding them through sport as a last celebration of the dead that these prisoners may have caused, whether it's from war, battle, or whatever it may be. Additionally, they would use these prisoners as performers or entertainers. So they would, again, pit them against each other, make them fight to the death. And this would be a source of entertainment. Now, Etruscan cities, we know, were largely influenced by their sport and their competition. So, for example, you can see here, this is the remnants of an Etruscan city. You would see these amphitheaters, these places of competition right in the center of the cities, because this was something that was very important to their cultures. Now over to the left, there's the burial tombs that I was talking about earlier. And you could see those depictions of sport and lifestyle in these tombs. And like I said, the Etruscans were a major source of inspiration for the Romans, much like the Greeks were also a source of inspiration for the Romans. So when the Etruscans fell at the hands of the Romans, which occurred about 509 BC, the Romans kind of picked up where the Etruscans left off and adapted to their culture, which you'll see as I continue today, that the Romans were, well, where the Greeks were very regimented on these were Greek things, and you had to be very Greek and honor your Greek culture, the Romans were much more willing to say, okay, we've conquered this society. What did they have going for them? What's something fun that they did? Well, let's take that and make that part of our culture. So they were very much, their identity came from lots of different sources, where the Greeks were very Greek, the Romans were a little Etruscan, they were a little Greek, they were a little this, they were a little that, if that makes sense. So ancient Rome, like I said, kind of came when they conquered the Etruscans in 509 BC. At this point, they kind of became, formed their own empire, their own government, and this was started where the Etruscans were, so in this north central Italy, and then expanded outwards. So the Roman Empire itself didn't form until about 27 BC. So the ancient Rome was kind of split. When we study ancient Rome, we split it into different sections. So section 1 of its history would be the Roman Republic, which is 509 BC to 27 BC. Once the Roman Empire was established, then we call that the Empire period. Now, as we move forward, in about the 4th century AD, you see the empire divided into two. There was a western half and an eastern half of the Roman Empire. Now, as we see here, at the peak of Roman rule, they had a huge range. So they started here in Italy, they're all the way out to Spain and Portugal, up to Great Britain, across Turkey into the modern-day Middle East, and then across the top of Africa. So they have this entire Mediterranean region that belonged to them, and they would rule trade and war, and created a large civilization. Now, when the empire divided in the 4th century, the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire split pretty evenly west and east. So half of it went to the Eastern Empire, half went to the Western Empire. Western Empire was more of modern-day Europe and North Africa, whereas the Eastern Roman Empire came out of what is modern-day Turkey, the Middle East, and again, maybe more of the Egypt and eastern side of North Africa. The Western Empire lasted about till 476 AD before it fell. But the Eastern Empire, which was again centered in Constantinople, or modern-day Istanbul, which is in Turkey, for those who are not geographically inclined. This is the connection between Europe and the Middle East. That's where it was centered out of, and that lasted until 1453. So that lasted a really long time. We're talking in 1453. We're just a few decades away from Europeans first coming to the Americas. Um, in 1453, around that time, you would have had, probably in that same year, you would have had wars against uh, England and France were battling. This is we're talking an empire that lasted a ridiculous amount of time, almost 2,000 years, from the Republic stage to the last of the Eastern Empire. Now, one largely influential emperor, ruler of Greek was Nero. Now, Nero was heavily influenced by Greek culture. So, this guy was, I'm trying to think of how I can describe it. He's kind of what he looks like in this picture, to be honest with you. So, he was the type of guy who was like, he realized that he'd been influenced by his mom too long, so he had her killed. Um, got rid of her because he was like, Mom, come on, stop influencing my decisions. Off with your head. He was probably what we would consider not so great of a guy. He was most known for political assassinations, getting rid of people who opposed him or that he just didn't like. Um, but beyond this, he connected with the Greek culture quite a bit. In fact, he thought that he was just some genius, something special, the best thing to ever happen to the Roman Empire. A real inflated ego, and that only the Greeks understood him, not his people, but the Greeks understood him. So because of that, he was like, okay, let's have a special Olympics, and this Olympics is going to be completely in my honor. It's going to celebrate me. I'm going to even compete in a chariot race. So he goes out and he does this chariot race and wrecks his chariot, falls off, gets dead last. But he's the emperor and he's so great, so he made them declare him the winner anyways. Everyone else was cheating or had something going on. He was clearly the best one out there. Um, and you might think that the Greeks liked him because, hey, this is this Roman, this large civilization that exists, and he really likes us. We've got a connection with this guy. But no, once he died, the Greeks revoked his victory. They were like, "You did not win that. Now that you're dead and won't kill us for saying so, um, you were not the victor here." So this is important because you're seeing while the Roman Empire largely kind of flushed out the ancient Olympics and a lot of the Greek festivals where sport was happening, there was some of that influencing even the highest levels of the Roman Empire and the Roman civilization. Now, if we compare the Greeks and the Romans, we're going to find a main difference. The Romans, while they still celebrated philosophy and thought philosophy was important, they largely replaced it um, with engineering and building. They were a lot less of thinkers as much as they were of doers, which we'll see in a second when we talk about their philosophies. They no longer believed in a rate. They thought, we'll be excellent, but we don't need a philosophical concept here um, of struggle and of um, like the struggle from Agon and so on. But what we did see is the Romans were these excellent engineers. In fact, many of the roads exist today not only as ruins, but some of them are actually utilized today. Here's two, for example. This one, all the way up in Great Britain. This is a long way from Italy. They had roads going from Rome, the center of the Roman civilization, all the way up into the islands of Great Britain. Meanwhile, once you're in Rome, you can see these just magnificent built roads to this day still exist, still functional that you could walk through without falling in holes or tripping. Um, just excellent structural items that still exist. Greeks, the Romans and the Greek gods were basically parallel to one another. They were polytheistic, so they had lots of gods. But if you start to look through, now the Romans say we don't have the Greek gods. No, no, no. We have our own gods. These are different than the Greek ones. So the Greeks were like, "Hail Zeus," like we see here. We've got this. He's our prime god, and he throws lightning bolts when he's angry, and he's strong and takes a human-like form. And the Romans were like, "Nah, Zeus isn't real. We've got a dude named Jupiter, and he's this human-like supreme ruler. He's the king of all the gods, and he occasionally throws lightning bolts when he's upset." Not similar at all. No, in reality, if you look at it, they're very parallel. It's the same gods, just renamed. So now the Greek part of the culture is erased, and the Romans have replaced it with their own gods, if you will. But in reality, it's the same. They're just it's just a copy. It's like I said, the Romans largely copied other civilizations, even when it came to their religion. Um, as the Romans continued, though, you start to see some of the Roman emperors adopt Christianity and embrace Christianity. So it's kind of this phase where it's like the mythology, the polytheistic um, mini god religion was no longer really kind of followed or believed, but that was replaced with Christianity as the Christianity sprung out of um, the Jewish civilization, the Jews that were living in Rome, in the Roman Empire. Because again, the Roman Empire spread out along a lot of space and kind of captured in um, lots of religious groups. Now, the Roman beliefs were again, philosophy had a place, but it was secondary to going and doing things. So one of the big things that they believed in is military. So the Romans were famous and infamous for their military tactics. Up to this point, while I'm sure there were some military tactics, a lot of what happened was just random attacks of armies just going out and smashing into each other and doing battle, and there wasn't really much of a plan. But the Romans were like, if we stick in groups and we plan it and we do things like we see here and protect one another, we are going to be a lot better military. So all these different groups would come, they'd see the Roman army coming, they'd prepare, they would have similar tools. They were like, okay, we're good for battle. And they'd run at them, get all disorganized, and the Romans would keep lines, they would march together, they would have their shields interlocked, and they would just slaughter every army that came towards them. And because of this, they took great pride in their military. It's what was allowing them to expand, to get more resources, to get more ideas, to build these roads connecting the whole world, because they were going to be the civilization that ruled everything in their minds. So, because of this, their culture was very stripped down into just the basics that was needed to create a very good military. Their religion, while they had some, there wasn't much ceremony. It wasn't something that they were star-eyed over. Um, they weren't like enamored with their own religion. No, rather they were more focused on this kind of emotionless military build up our society. This is what matters, nothing beyond what we see here. So the philosophers largely provided a code of conduct. They believed in character formation, because if you have good people, then that makes a good group of people, and a good group of people makes a good civilization. So they believe strongly, let's be well-rounded people who are great and prepared for the military, who are smart and intelligent, So we have doctors and engineers and everything that we need. And let's essentially make sure we are better than any other civilization in any aspect. Let's be excellent in every way so that we can survive and build our republic and build our civilization outwards and continue to get larger and better. And as I've said many times, part of this allowed them to be more inclusive of other cultures. They were expanding, they were conquering, and they believed that they should be good people, no matter what that ended up looking like for them. So different groups, and we'll cover these real quick. So we have the Cynics. The Cynics were largely devoted to the ideas of Socrates, who we've talked about before, so the Socrates and Plato, so I'm not going to get super into that. But they believed in character and that didn't matter in the circumstance. And they influenced what I would say is probably the largest, the most important philosophical group in ancient Rome, and that's the Stoics. One thing with the Cynics, though, is they were very adamant that political relationships were pointless and should be ignored. Because this made them very prone to anarchy, and their opinions promoted anarchy. So when the Stoics came around, they kind of said, you know what, we like what you say, but we believe that politics are important. We believe in connecting to our republic, to our society. Again, this is a Roman group, so that makes sense. So one of the other ways that they broke is while Plato and Socrates were largely distrustful of the body. Can you believe what's around you based off what your body perceives? Is that reality? Kind of this highbrow thought. The Stoics were like, no. Let's trust our perceptions. Our bodies are important to us and being good people and understanding the world around us. But largely what the Stoics are known for, and you hear Stoicism today, is they emphasize happiness, optimistic, and whatever life dealt. So if they were about to face death, they didn't show any emotion. They were optimistic. They were kind of emotionless in the face of pain or fear that other philosophies might feel. So, for example, you can take Zeno, the kind of founder, the developer of this philosophy, and he says the purpose of life is happiness, which is achieved by virtue, living according to the dictates of reason, ethical and philosophical training, self-reflection, careful judgment, and an inner calm. So you have very calm, very precise, and well-rounded people who are very reason-driven, not emotion-driven. They were very flatlined. They were happy at all times. They were not affected by fear or large excitements. No, they were always happy. That is it. Now, this is great for Roman society. So they love this. This was adopted pretty quickly because if you are a society driven towards conquering and military, you probably like that the leader of the Stoic philosophy says, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more than we say. Yeah, you probably like that. If you're trying to make a military, probably say, hey, you guys need to listen and not say anything. Listen, be happy, be emotionless, go places, and even in the face of death, don't care. Be okay with it. Stay calculated, even in very stressful situations. That makes a great military, and that makes a great group of people to build up a civilization. Makes great engineers, because there's just very predictable behavior. So This is because there's individualism, they were the master of their own fate, good personal conduct and character development, and no matter what happened, they accepted their fate. And you see this, I haven't seen the movie, but I saw it referenced quite a bit, so I went ahead and threw it in here, that the Gladiator movie displays that how someone would be kind of emotionless and have strict discipline and be okay with that because of the Stoic philosophy. Now, moving on from this, there was the Epicureans. The Epicureans were kind of sprung out of Stoicism, and they have similar ideas. They kind of rejected metaphysics. They rejected that religion should drive someone's behavior, which is both things from the Stoics. But they are, and additionally argued against idealism, that the body, you needed the body, you could trust the body for discovering reality and what's around you. Um, but they really thought that you should be joyful, and that the mind and body were both important for joy. So you can see here they were big into friendship. They were big into just being happy in all things, being doing things in moderation, avoiding bodily desires that might be bad for them, and having good knowledge and living a good kind of, I guess what we'd call today, a blue collar life, where you just do your job, you're happy with it, and be part of something. So one of the biggest Epicurean thinkers was a guy named Cicero, a philosopher named Cicero. Now, Cicero is actually the name of my hometown here, and it was named after this guy, but I'd never actually learned a lot about what he believed until I was preparing for this. So he basically didn't believe in unethical politics. So Julius Caesar, in his mind, was following politics that weren't ethical, and he says, you know what? This is not good. Let's not do that. And so he basically, there was a three big leaders in Roman Empire that he says, I don't like what you're doing. So they said, well, then get out of here. And they banished him from Rome. They kicked him out because he kept criticizing them. And what he also said was that the sport arenas were a great representation of what was wrong with Roman social problems. Like, you have these sports, they were built up and they were violent and kind of emotionless, and you'll see this later tomorrow when I do that lecture. But he didn't like that and said that was a reason why you shouldn't be in the Roman philosophy. And he was influenced by the Greek philosopher listed here. I apologize. Normally I look up how to pronounce names, but I didn't look that one up. Anticus, I would imagine. Um, and again, very ethical people, believed in developing the mind and the body so that you're a well-rounded person. So I'm going to, let's see here. I'm going to dive into Roman sports starting tomorrow. I'm going to stop here. I think this is good, about 30 minutes for today. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I think it'll be fun tomorrow. We're going to get into like gladiators and Roman sport in the Colosseums, which is always something interesting. All right, bye.